Hey everyone, and welcome to episode number 46 of the Lift Free and Diet Hard podcast. I'm Andrew Coates. I appreciate you tuning in yet again to listen to me host the people that I consider to be industry leaders in the elite. And every once in a while, I pluck someone who's been on my radar for a long time. More recently, got a chance to interact more formally. And we've been trying to schedule this. It finally worked. So I hope you guys welcome Josh Hillis to the show. Welcome.
How's it going? I'm stoked to be here.
Right. And so, I think some of the established community will certainly know you by reputation and credibility in the industry. But for those who aren't yet familiar with you, well, I made a short list of some of the stuff about you. So you started as a personal trainer 17 years ago.
Yeah.
Started fitness writing 14 years ago.
Yeah. Oh man, you really did do your homework.
Oh, absolutely, right. And that was turned into some book writing. So you wrote Fat Loss Happens on Monday with Dan John.
Yeah.
Right. That's one of your books. And then you have a recent book, I think it was last year, Lean and Strong, Eating Skills, Psychology, and Workouts.
Yeah.
And I know you've got another one in the works. So you're a published author.
Yeah. Yes, I am.
So have I left anything really important out that, you value?
No, I mean that's a big thing. I've been a trainer forever. I've kind of ended up with my first book, I kind of got more into like habit-based eating, and now I'm doing eating skills, and it's kind of a jam.
We're going to talk more about that. So I mentioned, your reputation. As I said, you have some really serious credibility in what I consider to be the respected evidence-based coaching world. I doubt your average, Mr. Olympia competitor knows who you are. I don't think we really care about that sort of thing. And one of the recent examples is, I know Hillis, who's a friend of both of ours, she had you speak to her coaches. I know she shared that on her social media. I think it was a few months ago, right? So stuff like that. And as I mentioned off air, you first hit my radar on Kevin Larrabee's Fitcast, which is sort of one of the big foundational fitness podcasts out there in the ether. And it's certainly a heavy influence on how I've gone about running this podcast for the last 4 years. Right?
Totally.
And there would be a lot of overlap in a lot of the guests. So if anybody listening is an old fan of that, they might go back and go, oh yeah, Josh from there. So we recently connected over Instagram, and this is where I want to have some fun. So how have you found the experience of translating all that work, all that established reputation and career into building certainly Instagram? Because I know you have following in other realms, but I know Instagram is a place you only very recently turned around and tried to pay attention to and grow.
Yeah.
I have the bias of having, the strongest presence on Instagram, liking it the most, but I also find that in terms of the balance of credibility and a hub for all your work and shareability, I think that Instagram is probably one of the best social media platforms for fitness professionals. So how's it been translating all that body of work into growing on this platform to try and catch up?
That's an interesting question. It's kind of fun because like I built my whole following blogging, and so I was really used to that format, and I was like that length. Right. And I'm used to thinking in terms of that length, and I'm thinking and it really, Instagram is really a new way of thinking for me. And so it's one of those things where like, like coaching, I have an hour with someone. Writing a book, I've got 350 pages. Writing a blog, I've got 1,200 words, right? And so to break it down into these little bite-sized chunks, I think it's actually making me a better coach, because I've gotten kind of I like to build systems, right? Like my book is this like really in-depth system. And so I had to think like, what's something that I can deliver in like a screenshotted tweet length. And it's been so much fun to get that. It's making me sharper.
I absolutely would agree with that. I think there's two things I want to grab. I'll start with this. Having to write under the Twitter format, which, sometimes people malign it because it's popular and they're like, oh, I don't want to do the thing everyone else is doing. Well, let me let you in on something. They fucking work. Nothing should Twitter posts. You've discovered this.
Yeah.
But when you're constrained by the character limit of Twitter, you have to choose every word, every character carefully, and then you're forced to use the strongest language possible. And I've had very much a year and a half of daily practice working on this. And I promise you, it makes you a significantly better writer.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the second thing, and this is something that I'm certainly parroting a Jordan Syatt concept, but it's something I believe in myself. If you're looking at social media, it's going to be a lot easier when people find you and find out that you have some serious, I keep using the term career capital, and I want people to grab onto that concept. Not only are you a fitness writer of articles for a very long time, which again, Jordan still believes is probably the best piece of backbone you can build a career out and around, but you've also published books, which is a really big piece of career capital. So,
Helps.
I think when people are looking at building their social media, if you're starting with social media and all you have is social media, people may find, oh, that's a really good quote, go in there, your profile. And then they start looking around and go, well, what else do they have? Oh, no podcast. There's no YouTube. There's no written articles. Sometimes there's no bloody website. They certainly don't own a physical gym facility. They haven't published a book. And all of a sudden it's like, well, okay, this person's good for sound bites, but it doesn't really prove to the other coaches that are out there who are looking for, thought leaders in the industry to say, well, it doesn't validate the choice of hitting the follow button. And people are looking for, they're buying something from you. They're spending their time to include you on their stream, their feed, right? So that is taking something away from them. So when we're not entitled to someone following us, we have to create an incentive for someone to want to say, you're going to be someone I want to plug into, and you could potentially take the place in my feed of a family member with updates about newborn kids and shit like that. You better fucking earn it and be worth it.
It better be awesome. It better be fucking rad.
So what's that process been like for you diving into Instagram, and what have you found fun? What have you found challenging?
I think so again, like the most challenging part has been just like thinking in terms of that like shorter thing. But I think what you were talking about is sort of like a content ladder where and I already have that. And so I'm kind of starting ahead. If someone wants to look at me and they find the soundbite and they dig it, then they can find podcasts, they can find long and short blog posts, they can find books. And what you said is like, that is really important, right? Like we're there's like frequency and intensity, right? And on Instagram, I'm really playing the game of frequency. Can I deliver something small and useful like all the time? But sometimes someone wants to know, like, how do I get more? Like, how do I get more of that? And and I'm actually trying to do that a little bit in Instagram also. I've got a couple longer videos, like 5, 6, 7 minute videos. But I'm enjoying the whole thing. So I love metrics. I really, really, really like metrics. And I love the not knowing. Like I love that I have no idea what's going to connect with people. There are things that I think are so important that like no one gives a crap about. And then there are things that are like offhand, like 10-second tweets that like connect with, like I got 300 follows. And I'm like, how does that work?
I'll give our listeners a little insight into some patterns I've discovered playing with it. If someone's going to share something, it's going to be something that they're thinking, shit, I wish I wrote that. And it's going to be stuff, oh yeah, I know that. That's totally awesome. And often that's a slightly simpler concept. We get really abstract. I was talking to a friend of mine today who's doing this stuff, but he's doing it more for the finance world, which is a harder thing to share. And I saw his post today, which got no traction because it was a really abstract concept that I had to kind of go through and go, what? And I'm thinking, no. Especially if you're going to feed people finance stuff, let alone fitness stuff. You've got to feed, very, very straightforward concepts that they're going to go, yeah. And then they want to hit that share button, not the abstract stuff. You want to get abstract. The abstract stuff goes into the longer form articles or even the books, right? So if you play with it, as you were alerting, as I certainly have played around with a lot, and as anybody else playing with it will learn, if you practice over time, you'll see that a certain type of message, simple and resonant, that relates to their experience or what they value, tends to be the stuff people share the most. And if people are sharing it, it does really well on the algorithm. More people see it, saves, all that. People just hitting likes isn't really enough. It's got to be something that people go, hell yes, I need to share those with every single friend of mine. because if they're sharing it in their story, they're also stamping their reputation and approval on whatever you've posted. And the message has to be good. And they also have to, for the most part, like you and know you. Sometimes it goes out into virality and all of a sudden people just keep sharing it and sharing it and they have no fucking clue who you are, but they like it. And then it just goes nuts. That happens. Right?
Yeah.
But your followers, in order to follow you, they're going to have to like who you are too.
Yeah.
And you have that built in, because what I think is happening with you now, and I kind of was doing the same thing with Brian Cron, because I've been pushing your stuff recently.
Yeah.
I've been pushing the hell out of
I
Brian.
appreciate it, dude. I
Oh,
so totally appreciate it.
well, it's about its mindset, right? Like, that's not taking anything away from me, right? I saw
Yeah.
your video where you hit 5,000. You were like just giddy happy. I was super cool. That was awesome.
Yeah.
So I did the same shit with Brian Cron, because guess what?
Yeah.
Who fucking knows who Brian Cron is? And when Brian is not posting about like political shit or just like getting twisted up about, the stuff in the pandemic this year, I won't touch that stuff, because people come to my account for like fitness and nutrition. They just don't want to deal with that stuff. It's a break, because there's so much of it.
Yeah.
But Brian's also a brilliant coach and knows probably more about, just the ins and outs of like practical wisdom that helps people than I've ever fucking, like, he's forgotten more than I've ever learned, right? He's great at it. So all of a sudden someone sees Brian, like, oh, hell yeah, Brian Cron, he's written for T Nation forever. Oh, cool, follow.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, Josh Hillis. Totally know who that guy is. Boom. It makes it very easy to hit that follow button. And it goes back to the whole thing. If someone's new on the block or trying to build out a reputation, there is a lot of value to establish this. And I like what you said, this content ladder, and what I always call this career capital to back up the credibility of your social media account. So I think it should be, in the grand scheme of things, a two-pronged approach. Really study and learn the social media stuff if you value it. You don't have to. And also build the other stuff. And again, this also goes to show that Instagram is not the only place where people have followings. You and many other people, I think of like Dr. Mike T. Nelson. Mike T. Nelson's email list is probably 10 times, if not more, his Instagram following.
Yeah.
So you get stuff like that. But I think there's also a lot of value in being where people are. And you guys are all on a mission to change more lives, earn a livelihood. We all are.
Yeah.
We all deserve to earn a comfortable livelihood coaching people and helping people. This whole poor trainer and, oh, I just want to help people, and this discomfort with actually getting paid, your worth. I'm long over that.
It's weird.
It's weird. Yeah. And I say that because I want coaches to kind of go, no, like, you're undercharging. Fuck it. I mean, I still undercharge for my hourly worth, but I am living doing this stuff. But again, you can charge more. Anyway, so I'm off track. So I also wanted to really just like open the floor to you on some of the stuff we've been talking about. And you post a lot about this. And it's kind of this list. So I'll dive in here. It's like things like emotional eating, stress eating. And there's a post that it's your post I shared on my wall. And I'll read the quote. I've got to find it. I know I have the quote here. If a nutrition program doesn't include skills for managing stress eating and emotional eating, it's an inadequate program. That pissed some people off. I had some people, I don't know if you saw this stuff, but some people got really twisted about this.
Really? Okay, so I was trying to respond to all the comments on there, and then I felt like it started like I felt like it locked me out after like 20. I wasn't sure if
it was giving you a little red, you can't reply.
Like my comments started disappearing after I posted them.
It's something that Instagram does. It looks like you're spamming a page. And I noticed the same thing.
Okay.
They meme my quotes all the time and they share it on their wall. So I'll go in and I'll say thank you to all the responses, and all of a sudden they just won't go up anymore. It'll give me this little red, you can't reply. So I'm quite literally locked out of commenting on T Nation posts now. And it's just this, God damn it. But it's the algorithm.
Yeah.
So sorry that happened. But yeah, so there was at least a couple of people who are just arguing and going nuts about it. It's like, okay, like, first of all, if this doesn't apply to you or someone doesn't need these skills, okay, come on, like, we know.
Fine.
But two, I mean, are you triggered by this to the point where maybe you're not doing this very well and it bothers you, so it's offended you a little bit, and now you have to start fighting about it?
Yeah.
I noticed that these people were creating these arguments that didn't exist. They were straw manning the position of your post and arguing with the straw man that didn't really exist. And I'm just like, what are you doing? This doesn't make any sense.
And there you have the internet.
You have the internet. So that's the other thing. If you want to build a social media following, be prepared for a little bit of this. I don't get much of it. You'd be surprised. I also don't try to post a lot of confrontational shit. Some people
I've had, at one point there was an entire website where they rated how bad a fitness product was and how many Josh Hillises it got. I've gotten a ton of, like, I've got like the randomest attacks at different times.
I've heard something about this. Every once in a while, something weird happens. It's like, do you know who my friend Mike Howard is?
Of course, yeah.
He's been on the podcast a bunch before. So everybody loves making fun of how like bad movie reviews with Mike Howard.
Yeah.
How Patrick Humphrey, who's a good friend from everybody knows Patrick.
Amazing, yeah.
Everybody is like, there's always Patrick memes. In fact, Patrick and I bear a passing resemblance, to say the least. Like, poor guy, always my before photo, because I'm like, in terms of like my stature, I'm quite a lot bigger than he is. So he always becomes the before photo. And I had a friend of mine here from here in Edmonton. She's at this small conference in Dallas a couple of years ago, and Mike T. Nelson's presenting, and she's just sitting there. She's not really part of our world as much. And so up pops a slide with me in it and Patrick Humphrey, and she's just sitting there going, what the fuck is going on? How does this?
Do you have a twin?
Yeah. But anyway, so Patrick just pops up in everything. So there's these little, things that happen. So I remember something about the Josh Hillis scale. I don't remember the context.
It was a long, long time ago.
Well, maybe we'll have to revive that a little bit. But I'll circle back around to sort of my original question. I tend to do this. Yeah. I apologize. The listeners, anybody who's been around for a while knows this. So yeah, let's open it up to, your thoughts on, I guess, coaches certainly approaching and developing skills with their clients for things like emotional eating, stress eating, skill-based eating. And I know you made a comment about eating based on personal values. So I'll go to floor to you and we can kind of go where we go.
Oh man. So stress eating and emotional eating is kind of like my current research interest. It's why I'm digging in a lot on contextual behavioral science and what the absolute like base level of working with emotional eating is letting people feel their feelings and letting them know that like all their feelings are okay. Right? Because basically like emotional eating is, I have this emotion, I'm not supposed to have this emotion, I'm going to eat to numb it out. Right? Stress eating is like, I've got the stress, I don't want to feel the stress, I'm going to like eat to avoid it. Right? And so people tend to relate to it like, either if I had different emotions, I wouldn't stress eat. Right? Well, I mean, sure. But also there's like, I need to change my emotions. I need to change my emotions. I need to change my thoughts. I need to like think positive, I need good vibes, like all this kind of thing. And what's more effective for stress eating is actually a willingness to be with those emotions and some tools for getting perspective on those emotions. Right? So, so the very, very first level is going like, oh, you know what? I know everyone looks super happy on social media. I know everyone looks like they've got perfect lives. No one's ever down. But getting like, oh, it's actually normal and okay for me to be up sometimes and down others. And I actually don't have to eat to change that, And like so many times when I first start coaching with people, something really stressful happens and they feel stressed out. And I have to say like, no, like any human would feel stressed in that situation, right? Something really sad happens, anyone would feel sad like when something's sad, like it's okay to be a human. That's the beginning. That's what we would call acceptance or willingness to feel. And then we want to get some sort of like perspective taking, where when we're in it, we can get like when we're feeling these emotions really strongly, and when we're like kind of like swept up in our thoughts, like they're true and urgent and commands. That's another place where people like feel like they have to eat, right? Where if we can notice what, like if we can just label our emotions, that gives us a little bit of perspective. If instead of just feeling bad or stressed, we can say like, oh, I'm really frustrated, or I'm really like, that gives us a little perspective. And the same thing, if we can notice our thoughts as thoughts, almost like we're watching them on TV, then we can have those thoughts and we can have those emotions and still make actions that are like still take actions that are in line with our values, in line with our goals. We can have the both simultaneously.
I guess if you have the ability to take it, put it in a box, understand it, you can take a step back a little bit and just not be reactive and just do this. I think a lot of trainers would understand this concept. Certainly, a lot of people develop this broken relationship. I'll use the term broken. Maybe it's inappropriate. I don't know. Where if they feel a certain way, they've learned at a younger age to respond by eating a certain way.
Yeah.
So it's understanding that relationship and then rewriting it, getting,
Yeah.
and like you've said, you kind of give yourself permission or a pause to be able to step back and go, wait a second, I'm not supposed to eat in response to this. And as you said, I'm understanding, it's okay to feel this way. And then if they feel a little bit more in control of it, or if it's a little bit more normal, then they don't feel quite as compelled to reach for food.
Yeah, like what it really comes down to is people are really effective when they allow the thoughts and emotions to be there and change their actions. Works really well. It works. That works best for people that have the most issues with stress eating, and for when things are like the most stressful. But yeah, it's like, oh, I can have this, I can have these thoughts and feelings, and I can still take these actions. I love that you said pause, because a pause is really, like earlier we were talking about like messages being abstract, right? And some of the perspective taking skills we use for being with thoughts and emotions can be a little abstract, but pausing is really concrete. Someone can say, you know what, if it's the middle of the afternoon, I'm not going to have a snack without pausing 10 minutes. That's really concrete. You can track it. You can time it. You can, and for so many people, just putting that gap gives them the opportunity to intervene and get some perspective, change their actions.
One of my favorite approaches to dealing with some of these things is if someone can recognize, all right, certain types of things cause certain types of stresses, or they feel a certain way, or certain kind of environments. They know they're going to be in an environment. The classic thing is sort of a birthday party, or they know every weekend, okay, cool, they're in social situations or around family that are, triggers to drink or eat a certain way. Fast forwarding, looking to that, knowing it's coming, and then making a pre-planned decision. You are deciding beforehand, this is what I'm going to do, this is what I'm not going to do, this is my boundary on this. And I suspect it probably works kind of similar. It runs concurrent to what you're just talking about.
Yeah. Okay. So I love obstacle planning. I love obstacle planning, because most of the things that are going to be hard, we actually know ahead of time. And so, like you just said, we can say like, oh, okay, if I'm in this situation, I'm going to take this action. I like to take it in concurrently with that, have an obstacle plan for the thoughts and feelings, right? So like, let's actually expect to have these thoughts. Let's expect to have these urges. Like, let's expect to have these cravings. Like, let's expect to, so it could be, oh, you know what, this social situation, I actually don't want to drink. And I know that I'm going to have these thoughts about like feeling left out or what that means. And expecting at 3 o'clock in the afternoon to be bored and tired and want to have a muffin just because you're bored and tired. Right. And it's really, really cool. Because then at 3 o'clock, when that feeling shows up, it doesn't feel like original and unique to the situation and special. It's like, oh, you know what? This always happens. I've got the skills to actually check in with myself. I know I'm not hungry. I know I'm just bored, like it and the thing that's really interesting with that is that even if people don't follow the exact action plan that they set out, they still make better choices because they weren't caught flat-footed.
This is something I say to all the clients I work with, and I usually will say it in the context of kind of binge weekends. It's not about black or white, yes, no, good, bad. It's about making progress on this. So reducing the frequency, duration, and severity of any problem behavior. And if you add
Yes.
up over time, because let's say you got someone who, his goal is to lose 100 pounds, and they know these behaviors are major drivers for the long-term weight gain. So, before we get into a deficit, we still have to get into a manageable behavior where they're in maintenance, right?
Yeah.
And one of the most important things for long-term sustainable fat loss is to be able to have a good relationship with getting back to a maintenance or a plateau place. We know how people react to plateaus. They stall out, they freak out, this isn't worth it, and right back to the old behavior. So building in the ability to recognize, all right, I'm going to have a phase where it's a bit more restrictive. And you probably know who Jay Ashman is. Do you know my friend Jay Ashman?
I do, but I'm totally blanking. Like I told, yeah,
Everybody knows Jay. Jay's hysterical. He's been on the podcast before. Jay, some people will know Jay has a very blunt and direct, and sometimes, I don't know. He's very severe sometimes. He's a very good human being. So Jay actually posted something today, and it was about, you know, I need to read this post. I actually want to get this right, but it ties into what we were just talking about. So let's see. He posted, most people don't need to starve to lose weight, but a little hunger is good and acceptable. Draw the line at ravenous. You like, guess what? It goes into this sense of entitlement. You know, okay, you got to be okay with being a little hungry sometimes. You're not entitled to always feel full and all this sort of shit. So,
yeah.
anyway, back to what we were talking about. You know what? I'm going to throw it back to you because I just threw us off course a little bit.
Well, no, that's actually a way. So a way that people can calibrate the size of their meals, like one of the things that I teach alongside guideline. I teach guidelines and I teach hunger and fullness cues, right? And one of the ways, like a lot of people have trouble, especially in the beginning, like noticing when they're full and stopping, right? And so one of the ways to calibrate that is actually to flip it and know and take a look, like, do I get hungry about 30 minutes before the next meal, right? Because if you don't, it was probably too much food, right? If you're getting hungry 3 hours before the next meal, then that was probably way too little food. But that's since you're talking about hunger, like it is actually normal to get hungry before the next meal. And a lot of clients who struggle with weight loss are never hungry, or they eat to make sure that they're never hungry.
Also, and I was going to jump on something you said earlier, and I think it's possibly maybe one of the most important topics, boredom, right?
Yeah.
People need to learn the difference between bored hunger and actually what hunger is versus
Yeah.
physiological hunger.
Yeah. So that okay, so let's jump right in, right? Three questions you can ask yourself. Do I feel a hollow feeling in my stomach, right? Or do I feel something else? Am I hungry for a balanced meal? Or is it just this like specific treat, right? And if I pause, does it build or does it fade? So cravings will sometimes fade, not always, but hunger will typically build and build. That hollow feeling in your stomach, once people get that, they're like, oh no, like I don't feel a hollow feeling in my stomach. Like maybe I feel tired or I have a headache, or maybe I feel tense in my shoulders, maybe I don't feel anything. Like that's actually pretty clear. And then the one that like, do I want a balanced meal or do I want to treat? That one's super clear. And then the last one, kind of bonus one, is am I thirsty? Right? A lot of times people just drink a glass of water. They're like, I was actually just thirsty. But once people can sort that out, that gives them a lot of power, right? Like there's so many things. It kind of comes back to the like the labeling the emotions and getting some distinction. Like there's a lot of just being disconnected where we're like, I don't know what I feel. I don't know what I'm feeling in my body. I'm not really really aware of my thoughts as thoughts. And when people are stress eating, a lot of times it's just this sort of like amorphous bad.
There's something I think probably relates directly to this. And we can look at it a broader view about our growing discomfort as a society for being able to sit there quietly without doing anything, being bored. I mean, do you remember when we were young? You and I are certainly of a generation before cell phones. When we were young, you go to the bathroom, we didn't have a fucking a smartphone in our hands, and I don't know, you're reading the goddamn back of an air freshener can, right? You know that, but anybody who's younger, kind of like, what are they talking about, right? But I mean, I had my first smartphone when I was in my early 30s. I certainly had my first cell phone
Yeah.
that I only turned on to make outbound calls in university when I was 21, 22. So back then, though, I remember being able to sit down and just kind of entertain yourself in your own thoughts and sort of sit
Yeah.
peacefully. And, as I've gotten older, and certainly with social media, always, the smartphone in your hands, it is very difficult to sit there and just pause and stop
Yeah.
without needing something, some sort of stimulation to break up the boredom. I think there's a study, you're probably more familiar with this than me, where people actually would choose to give themselves electric shocks rather than sit there with nothing to do. Anybody, I know
Yeah.
this popped up in a few books, so this is a very real thing. Can you imagine that people would rather shock themselves than actually be bored? So I think some people's response to the discomfort of boredom is to automatically go for food.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. It's funny because I was having a conversation with a friend of mine that I ran cross country with in high school, and we were actually talking about like after cross country practice, like sitting there waiting to get picked up, and like we just sat there and we talked, or like someone like played guitar, or there were times where we just literally just like sat there, and we were talking about like we remember like the seagulls, and like there was this thing like and I was like, does anyone have that anymore? Does anyone ever have like just waiting? Like, does that exist? Um, but yeah, you're totally right. Like, we aren't used to being bored anymore, and we're used to like constant stimulation, and a lot of people just eat just in response to being bored. And there's there's two there's three ways to go with all of these things, right? With emotional eating, stress eating, boredom eating. Do I like accept it and find a way to be with it? Do I do something about it? Or the awesome one is, do I do both? Right. So like, can I use some perspective taking to actually like notice like, oh, I'm just bored, and it's actually like okay to be bored. And actually, you know what, like my life's kind of stressful. Maybe being bored for a minute is actually a good thing. That's actually a kind of restorative. Um, or there's like, do I do something about it? Like I'm bored, like, oh, maybe I find something engaging to do, right? Like maybe I have a hobby, or maybe I just watch better TV, or do I, something like that. Or I go for a walk. Or the third way, which is ideal, is, can I be with this feeling, whether it's boredom or stress or whatever? Can I actually like be with it, not need to fix or change it, and then go do a thing, not to fix it, but just do a thing because it's like basic human maintenance, right? Like if I'm at work and I'm completely fried, can I notice like, oh, you know what? It's like, it's actually okay to be fried. I've had a lot to do, right? Anyone would be fried. And I'm going to go for a walk, not to like feel different. Like maybe I will feel different, but just because I'm a human, and like basic human maintenance is that I need to have a little bit of a rest on, like I need to actually have a break in a really busy day, right?
And I certainly struggle with that. I think there are different people in our space. I don't know if you pay attention to a lot of people's media, but we have people who, a lot of their media is very go, go, go. And you get this sense of just,
Yeah.
wow, they're doing everything. And my favorite example of that is a guy like Luca Hocevar. Now, I really like Luca, but Luca is an absolute machine. Now, I think a lot of people look at me in terms of what I do in my work. Like I do full-time coaching on top of all the other various things I'm doing.
Yeah.
And fried, I've been really fried the last 2 days. And, people always like kind of worry, oh, how are you going to be able to keep up this pace, whatever. I'm fine. I'm fine. Every once in a while, I get fried. So, I was very, very blessed that you were able to pick up this podcast a little bit short notice, but then it meant, oh shit, now I have to go and prep a little bit of stuff, right? So just one more thing,
Yeah.
but all good. I'm getting ready for this presentation down at, at a
Oh
conference
yeah.
in 2 weeks. So there's a few things I've got to get. I'm not good at the slide stuff. So, my girlfriend's going to help me with that. And so we're going to
Cool.
work on that tonight. But what I think that'll break the stress a little bit. But I found that every little thing, if a client turns around and does something goofy, wants to change up schedule a little bit, normally I'm like, yeah, no problem. And today it's like, oh, my sweet mother of God, right? It's
Yeah.
fuck, it's just another thing. So yeah, I think recognizing that, you're in that state, and I have to do a slightly better job of being able to take a big step back, put the phone away, because it's very, very easy to plug into what's going on with social media. And as the following grows, I promise anyone, there's more attention to it. It puts more stress on you to manage it, for sure.
Yeah.
So being able to put that aside, but there is a really good feeling anytime that I've turned the phone on silent, put it aside, and like deliberately said, I'm not going to interact with that for the rest of the evening. Or, I've got an evening with my girlfriend. I'm like, all right, put that away. And at first, I think it's hard because you feel disconnected from it. But once you get comfortable with it and recognize that there's peace with it, it becomes a very good feeling to be able to do it.
Yeah.
I suspect it's similar with being able to feel in control of some of the eating challenges that people face. But once you've kind of got a little bit of command of it and you feel that confidence, it feels really good to do it.
Yeah. Well, like it's one of those things where like we like on yeah, there's such a weird pull, right? Because like on one hand, it feels really good to take care of ourselves, right? It just does. I mean, we need a certain amount of like basic human maintenance, which is what I call it now instead of self-care. We just need like basic human maintenance. But there's also this, like you mentioned, like having the social media following and having this like pull to engage with it. Like there's all these, and I think everyone has, I think a lot of people, like the clients I get tend to be very successful and have big careers. And regardless of what it is, there's always a pull to like be the one that solves the thing, be the one that fixes the thing. Like they've got skills and they want to use them, right? And sometimes they also have an enormous amount of responsibility and people counting on them and things like that. But there's this combination of like, oh, I know if I've got this hour right now that I could actually step away. Do I do that, or do I check 5 more things off the list? And it's hard because they're both, one's like really like socially reinforced, and it might be like reinforced at work, and and the other one might be just like, oh, the only reason I'm doing this is because it fits the kind of person I want to be, and because I mean, could be like, oh, you know what, I've actually tracked metrics and I know that I'm more successful if I actually take a break. But there's an element of like, I'm just doing this because it's good for me, and it's because it's the kind of person I want to be.
I don't even know what to add to that. That's just good. I hope everybody listening is understanding the depth of your experience with this stuff. And one of the anytime I bring a guest on, I'm genuinely hoping that the regular listeners will go and say, all right, well, I've got to go and explore more of this guest's resources. So I want to make sure that at the very least they grab onto your Instagram, which has been growing very rapidly. And again, I think it's totally a product of a lot of people who knew who you were or finding you going, oh shit, I got to follow Josh, which helps boost it initially. But I think it's going to continue to grow if you're doing a good job of plugging in messages that resonate with people. And I think you're doing a good job of speaking in a language a lot of coaches kind of intuitively get, but weren't able to put into words. And then they're like, oh yeah, this is great. I have to share this with my followers, with my clients. And that's just going to bring more people to your door. So I'm excited to see how that continues to grow.
Thanks, dude. Thanks.
Yeah. You also mentioned eating based on personal values. And I know we didn't touch on that in all the proceeding.
Yeah. So like, if we want to get really nerdy, there's 4 places to pull from for motivation, right? From a self-determination perspective. And if there's anyone out there that's like, wait, there's 6, there's 4 that we can impact. So those are the ones that I talk about. So the first one is reward and punishment. The second one is guilt and contingent self-esteem. That's actually where most people pull from for fitness, right? They're like, oh, I'll feel good about myself if I hit this goal, or I'll feel good about, I'll feel bad if I eat this thing, right? Then we get values that apply to one area of our lives, and then we get values that are actually integrated in all the areas of our lives, right? So what we're really talking about is extrinsic motivation, which is really all like looking good for other people, and intrinsic motivation, which is like the kind of person that I want to be, right? And the benefit of pulling from intrinsic motivation is that it's more robust, right? Like we've all had clients who had a weight loss goal that was really important to them, and like then they hop on the scale and the scale didn't go down as fast as they wanted and they're totally derailed. Or they hop on the scale and it went down faster and they're totally derailed, right? Like they get thrown off because it's all, you know. Whereas if we're looking at the kind of person we want to be, if we're looking at our personal values, we don't change the kind of person that we want to be when it's not going well. We still want to be that person.
I do something similar, but I've used different language.
What? How do you say it?
So I think in terms of your identity. So the example I'll
Yeah.
give will be, I train a fair number of police applicants, something that a lot of them start showing up at my door and it became sort of a formal thing.
Yeah.
And I noticed there were two kinds, and this is a good analogy, I think, for life. There were the applicants who already were more fit, were already living the lifestyle that they imagined the police officer would live. And there's a second group that, and they often were the slightly older ones, the ones who had more likely to have kids and other life responsibilities, but they struggled with the consistency of the behavior. But I definitely got a very strong sense that they believed that once they got into the police, then they would live the lifestyle of the police officer. So, and which one group was generally successful, one group never was, because one group was already making decisions and engaging in behavior that aligned with their identity. I've written about this concept. It's either your identity or I love this phrase, aspirational identity. I like to get people to plug into an aspirational identity because this is how you can bypass willpower. James Fell's book, The Holy Shit Moment, definitely do a lot of this stuff. Is really, really good. Yeah. So, but the second group, obviously, they're struggling to make decisions and they're relying heavily on willpower. And if their lives are already tiring and complex, and throw kids and careers in there, there's not a lot of, willpower left over to make those decisions. But even in a broader context, anybody trying to make lifestyle decisions, nutrition decisions, workout decisions, if you see yourself as you have the identity as a fit person, or you were once a fit person, that's something that you can get back in touch with, or you aspire to it, it becomes much, much easier to make that decision. Same is true if you want to read. How many people want to read more? My identity very much wrapped up in being a reader. I am just as comfortable, if not more fulfilled, if I pick up a book and read a little bit than if I turn on the television. That's part of who I am, right? Yeah. It's automatic for me to go work out at the end of a day. It's something I'm looking forward to. It's a part of who I am. I am someone who works out. So the challenge for the people who aren't already established in these identities is to help them get in touch with the aspirational identity. Now, I'll throw it back to you and what you're talking about and see how much that relates to what you're talking about.
It's really tight. There's a huge overlap, right? We're talking about very similar things in slightly different ways, right? And so yeah, like you've got that identity and you go work out at the end of the day. I bet you go and work out at the end of the day, whether it was a good day or a bad day, whether it was tired, like it's just what you do, right? And when a lot of the clients that hire me are the people that I'm like their 10th coach that they've hired, right? Like nothing else has worked. They've done 20 diets. I'm usually not someone's first choice. And so they're hiring me because like the external goal wasn't enough. Like when they had the hard day, it just wasn't enough. And so I'm not against external goals. But for the clients that hire me, it's just insufficient, right? So we do a lot of values work and we look at like the areas of life that matter to them, and then we would look at the kind of person that they want to be in those areas, right? So like they've got their career, their family, and their fitness, and like that's part of it. As we go like, oh look, there's other things in your life that matter besides just fitness. If you think you're going to put fitness first in your life, you're being ridiculous, right? We need to fit this in with these other things. And then who do you want to be about fitness? And we look at like Do you want to be conscientious or wise or self-compassionate or playful or adventurous? And we figure out who they want to be. And then we actually practice and track, like when they've got a hard decision about food, if they chose wise, what's the wise choice there? Right? They know what the wise choice is. They can sort that out. And the cool thing about wise is that it's also it's flexible. Wise isn't like some standard of like the best food that they had. It's like, of the choices you have right now, what's the wise choice? They can make that.
I think a good example, I'm guessing you'll agree with me, is you're at the birthday party and the wise choice is to have the small piece of cake because of the
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
it's the socially conscientious thing to do. It is something that gives you a little bit of what you would enjoy in that circumstance, but it balances out, having a little bit of calories of something versus binging. Plus,
Yeah.
it means a good relationship with having a food that all too often people contextualize as bad and
Yeah.
really struggle having that. So there's a lot of layers to it. So good. I'm glad it's a good example.
That's huge, because then they're not off plan. They're not like off the wagon. They're not like, oh, it's a free for all. I had some cake. They're like, oh, I made the wise choice. I'm still like, I've, you know what? Like, not having the muffin on Tuesday was the wise choice. And like having the birthday cake right now is a wise choice. And I like to have clients, if I can, I try and have them have like 3 values, and ideally there's sort of a variety, right? So maybe it's like conscientious, wise, and connected. Maybe it's disciplined, playful, and there's that connectedness does matter to them as much as their fitness goals do, right? And if there's room for that, if that's part of the plan, then all of a sudden they're making really good choices in a really flexible way. And like people get all hung up about flexibility, but like if someone says like, what my values are like, why, like being wise, connectedness, and conscientious, they're making really great choices a lot of the time, even though they're having foods that like wouldn't be on a diet, or and that's what we practice.
And I like what you're saying because I can immediately recognize that sort of the framework I had elaborated on
Yeah.
is not as deep or as nuanced as your framework, right? Going deeper into value systems, because the identity of being someone who is a fit person, could potentially be a little more superficial. I think it could be very useful in some contexts, but I think that just the depth of what you're describing, and I like the concept of wise. I intuitively got it as soon as you explained it. And I hope everybody listening is kind of like, shit, this stuff makes sense. And if you have any written resources on it, I'm guessing you should probably make it. It's on your website. There's some stuff there.
Oh yeah. I've written a lot of blogs about versions of this. This would be great if I pulled one right out of I was like, you know what, the one called, but I don't. Yeah, joshhillis.com. There's something. There's at least 2 pretty in-depth posts about values. I did an Instagram video about values 3 weeks ago.
Are there any other resources? I'm big on books. Are there any other resources out there in the grand either that people can go and read that would also go into this? I mean, there are definitely, we only like skated the surface of it, but there's shades of Brene Brown's shame and guilt.
Oh yeah.
In some of the stuff you talked about. And I think every fitness,
love her stuff.
My sweet mother of God, I'm this big jack dude who writes for T Nation, Generation Iron, and yet I absolutely love Brene Brown. I'm definitely a contradiction of terms. I've got this fluffy black cat Aussie over here just doing it. So I don't think people can like pigeonhole me, but yeah, I honestly think that most coaches would benefit tremendously from reading Brene's stuff.
Yeah,
because it's just
so the thing is like people think of her as being about vulnerability, but she's about doing more stuff, right? She's about taking more action, and anything that has people take more action, I'm down for.
And she routinely talks about shame. So you have a better understanding of your shame triggers, which is a concept that she gets into, and understanding that this family member is a major shame trigger. So therefore, I don't bring up discussions of my eating or weight with this person, whereas this family member is a very safe place to have these conversations and be vulnerable.
Yeah.
If you intuitively get these kind of concepts and can get a client there. I love this. This is so simple. It's like, well, what's the difference between guilt and shame? Because people tend to use those words interchangeably. Guilt means, shit, I did a bad thing. There's a separation between you as your identity and the deed. Shame is, I am a bad person. I am incapable of doing this right. I am a screw up. I can't stop eating the cake. That's very shame.
Yeah.
And that's a very unhealthy place to be with all this stuff. At least if trainers understand how this stuff works, you're a lot further along understanding how your clients who struggle with emotional eating and stress eating even work. So I think it's a good resource. Are there any other resources that you've pulled from? That's certainly mainstream outside of like, obviously, complex
Textbooks.
textbooks.
So besides my book, obviously there's I really like to recommend The Happiness Trap by Russ Harris.
Okay.
Outstanding book. It is super, super, super good. It's probably the most accessible book on acceptance and commitment therapy, which is I guess technically what I do is acceptance and commitment coaching. And so his stuff fits really well with everything that we've talked about. It's all about like how to be with emotions, how to be with thoughts. It's also about how to like distinguish like what are my values and how do I take actions in line with my values even when it's hard. So excellent book. Emotional Agility by Susan David, also an ACT book, really good. Can you notice a theme? I'm like, ACT books. Those would be like The Happiness Trap. I actually recommend to everyone. I recommend to every client. I recommend to the trainers I mentor. I recommend just without exception. I think it's absolutely necessary skills, should be taught in high school.
I've been looking for some stuff because I've been binging on TED Talk and presentation books because I'm making sure I prepare really well for this coming up. But this stuff's going to go into the queue because I'm looking for some new stuff. Now,
cool.
I have, speaking of mentoring other coaches, I have a mentorship call where I have that as well within the next few minutes. So this has been a real pleasure. I'm grateful to have you.
This is cool.
On. So let's remind people, we've talked about your Instagram. So how do people find you?
So there's my Instagram, there's my blog, joshhillis.com. And then I run the eating skills program at GMB Fitness. And so I've got blog posts at gmb.io.
Awesome. So there's resources there to dig around in. We've talked lots about it. So if you listening are finding this, my podcast, me for the first time, then, well, I'd say if you want to dig in a little bit more, I would scroll through the list of people that I've had as guests. The last 46 episodes are the rebrand. There's 150 before that. I've had Dr. John Berardi and everybody in between the industry on this podcast. But in the last 46, number one has Sohee Lee, who's has a lot of overlap with the stuff you're doing. Maybe check out the episode with Sohee, maybe people like Jill Coleman, and you can look through this library of really great people. And maybe if you like it, you'll stick around and check out more. For my regular listeners, thanks again for always tuning in. I really do hope you guys will dive into more of Josh's stuff. Check out his media. I think you, especially the coaches, can realize, wait a second, there's a lot of really good stuff here that'll help you with your clients' relationships. And if you're not driving, guys, 5-star review would mean the world to me. If you're not yet following me on Instagram, Andrew Coates Fitness. So thanks again, Josh. It's a real pleasure. And
thanks, dude. This is fun.
Everybody else, stay tuned for next week.